I think we need a renaissance in cybersecurity in terms of how we talk about the industry. And we need to focus on strategic initiatives, like solving very specific problems. But you need to be able to solve problems before they happen as opposed to after they happen, because that's the world we live in as a post-breach world.
Welcome to the Threats Show. I'm Grant, and this is Chris, and we're your hosts, and we have a lot to share with you today. What's going on in the cyber world, Chris?
I darn near had to put down my turkey leg to come do this thing. So still on the food hangover. But yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. So I'm glad to be here, Grant. Thanks for having me.
We're going to discuss a few things today. We're going to talk about the healthcare sector in particular. A lot of threats to the healthcare sector. We're seeing a lot of growth there. It's funny, we're going to the holidays and everybody wants to talk about retail. We want to talk about healthcare. I have this hypothesis that I think we're starting to get to a world where like our healthcare data is so valuable to the adversary because they're engineering potential weapons in ways that we never want to dream right out of sci-fi. And so what do you want to say here, Chris, about healthcare threats in general? And I want to show a few.
A lot of the work that I do with Harbinger is we do quite a bit of work in healthcare, and a lot of it's helping big hospital chains and organizations to deal with both the physical threats from a ingress egress point, kind of dealing with some of the physical threats outside, but also what's going on inside from cybersecurity too. And one of the stark things that we've found going through this is number one, healthcare is really equipped to be able to deal with their own security. They solve very tactical problems. They don't think about the big picture. But one of the reasons why, and I'm just looking at the trends that I've seen, is you're two times more likely to be breached as a healthcare provider than any other industry. Healthcare is the number one. A lot of the vendors I talk to, a lot of the people I work with, all want to be able to sell into healthcare. And it's like, oh my God, these people are inundated, these poor people. But the reason why this is such a juicy target is because of all the data that you get out of it. If you want personal information about people and their lives and their conditions and what's going on, healthcare is an amazing place to do it because you get credit card information, you get insurance information, you get keys to the kingdom if you can get into the healthcare networks. And a lot of these companies, they do the band-aid work. I don't mean to besmirch Microsoft, but they take an incredibly Microsoft first approach. And that's a little bit myopic, a little bit nearsighted, but they really don't spend the time to actually build out a cybersecurity platform or cybersecurity infrastructure that allows them to defend against nation states, which there's a massive increase of those guys happening. The smaller guys are actually being consumed by the nation states and being rolled up. So a lot of attacks are more sophisticated and they're going against non-sophisticated users. And that's kind of where I see this world going, Grant.
Totally agree. I just asked Fletch about healthcare threats trending right now, and here's a handful of them. There's a lot. The
Well,
things that people can do to get ahead of these things are not that hard. A lot of this is things like educating your people for things like what Interlock's doing right now, or things around TA 4557. This would be a lot around making the routine kind of updates. And these are not just targeting big companies, they're targeting much smaller companies. And with where we're headed, just get proactive with this stuff, guys. Know that it's targeting companies like you and quickly do the work. This is not that hard of work if you look at it proactively. It is hard work when they get in, and now you're calling up Chris to help you do a ransomware negotiation.
I'm so tired of that. But no, you're absolutely right. And it's cyber hygiene is such a critical tool. I mean, I try not to be pedantic about everything, but typically we did a large red team operation, both physical and cyber operation, for probably the largest healthcare company in the world and a big hospital chain. And one of the things that when I go into these places, I'll go into a server room or I'll go into a NOC or a SOC or wherever, but I always look at their data infrastructure and look at their hardware. And one of the big things I always look for is cyber hygiene with their cables. Are your cables tied? Are they clean? Is your data room clean? And that tells me a lot about the organization and their ability to understand what they have underneath the hood by their hygiene. Because a lot of times, if I go in and I see nasty cables running around everywhere, wild, nobody knows where the cables are going. There's always a yellow cable that goes, nobody knows where that cable goes to. The first thing I do is number one, I go to the firewalls, and about 70% of the firewalls that I'll attack are misconfigured. I can get through easy. And then the second one is I always go to the printer ports. A lot of times, a lot of those things can be solved with just proper patching, updating, making sure everything's configured right. And it's just doing the basics. A lot of companies don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge and able to do that. So that's what, these CVEs that come out, pay attention. My God, it's a simple fix, but an inch of prevention is a pound full of cure or whatever. I don't know what it, but
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the cyber world, a lot of people I know running companies in the cyber world, I look at LinkedIn posts they're putting up, and they're taking people to the what if, the one off. Yeah, as a curious individual, those things are interesting, but you're not doing the low-hanging fruit. And I see this time and time again where a lot of these vendors are taking people away from the low-hanging fruit. They haven't solved low-hanging fruit, and now they go to these things that are like, well, what if this happens? What if they can find this one funky way in after doing like 50 things? It's like, focus on the simple stuff first. And once you complete that, feel free to go do these really complex, very funky paths. And I find that when you're strapped and you're these smaller companies, these individuals go one of two ways. Well, I'll just do the minimum compliance. I won't do anything. Or the curious ones oftentimes do these esoteric use cases and then they ignore the basic stuff too. And it's like, and then the best ones, and we know lots of you do this hygiene. And applauding those who do good hygiene. Please keep doing it and share with your friends. Do the hygiene. We preach this all day, both Chris and I, and that's part of why I invented the whole Fletch company. It's like, this is so important. Do the hygiene. But most of you actually don't have time to do it yourself, and you brought in the third party, cybersecurity consultant, virtual CSO, or an MSSP. And Chris, we're seeing so many of these folks, especially during this last year, transition from like, oh, well, I had a team of three, or I had a team of five, or I was a team, army of one was where I was doing this. And now it's like, I just don't have the bandwidth. The adversaries are getting a lot stronger. And so then they go find somebody to outsource. But how do you actually find somebody who's a good firm to outsource? How do you know they're actually doing the work? How do you actually work with somebody that is the right fit for you and will make sure to do this proactive work? So many folks just say, well, I'm doing it. Just trust me and check the box. Well, let's think about like what you do and what you should be looking for in a partner.
and that's a lot of smaller companies that, cybersecurity is an afterthought in most of the small companies out there. And there's so many more smaller companies, mid-sized companies than there are big companies that actually think about this stuff. And I call them accidental CISOs or people who accidentally got put in the security role because they are either in the IT. I've seen a person sitting at the front desk answering phone calls is in charge of IT and security. So you see a lot of these things. It's very tempting to go find. And interestingly, a lot of the IT outsourcing providers are also OEMs. So you see guys like Sharp, you see Lexmark, you see Icon, the printer guys are like, oh my gosh, I can help you with your IT operations. And then the next logical step is to go and do cybersecurity. And if you think about it, 25% of SentinelOne's revenue comes from the MSP business. That's how they sell. And they have a good offering, but it's also expensive and it's complicated, and but it drives a lot of revenue for them. And a lot of the OEMs use it. So when I look at this, I think a lot of these guys just try to put together a big peanut butter sandwich of solutions. It's like, well, I'll mix this here and here and maybe put a banana on it and some mayonnaise, and then they say, here you go. And here's your cybersecurity solution. But it really doesn't do anything to help you. There's a lot of smaller companies out there that are targeting the MSSP market, but the MSPs are being completely inundated by every other vendor in the world, and it's hard to get any mind share and be able to activate those channels. I think as an MSP trying to sell into one of their clients, you need to have a series of boutique companies that are out there that just tell the story from beginning and say, look, we'll come in and help you. We're going to get your hygiene better. We're going to make sure you patch. We're going to make sure you have ransomware protection. Make sure you have anti-data exfiltration protection all the way through the chain without having to make a giant investment. Because SentinelOne's expensive. Don't get me right. It starts off pretty cheap and then it goes pretty quick, kind of like Microsoft. It's a really, really beefy, juicy sales target for vendors like you, vendors like all the other guys I work with. I work with many of them. And they really want to try to get into the MSSP market, but their partners that they're working with are not the right partners. I'll just use Sharp as an example. And I don't mean to pick on them, but I really have a lot of respect for those guys. But they have access to customers. They have 35,000 customers, and this is just in the US. And they also have trust, a tremendous amount of trust. But the one thing they lack, if you put it in a triangle, the one thing they lack is expertise, and they don't understand the cybersecurity market. So they're going in basically selling a blind dog to a blind person or a dog that can't hunt if you're a hunter. And so they're really trying to push that issue. And it's really hard to glide the path on this stuff because a lot of these companies, they'll say, well, I'll just wait till I get breached. And if I get breached, we'll go from there. Now you got the whole compliance side of it that you have to deal with. And none of the OEM guys understand compliance or disclosure. What do I do if I get breached? How do I negotiate ransomware? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so it's a more comprehensive approach that does not need to have a giant platform provider charging with it. It's more of an unfederated network of just good companies that come together and they solve a problem that this company can't solve on their own.
It's
And
interesting because we're starting to work with folks like this. We help them from day one, like assessing the customers they're going in for a prospect. Like, okay, well, what's some low-hanging fruit, external facing technologies, and compare that to the threats trending now. And we help them one step at a time coach the companies because they already have the trust, but now we help them and arm them with the expertise. And we're helping them
exactly.
at the next level of like, okay, well, now let's do an inventory audit and let's compare that with what's trending and really start getting people thinking about this. Okay, you probably don't need to go run every aspect of a CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or every tool Microsoft has yet. Yes, I know you could buy it all, but a lot of it's going to be shelfware early. But buy some basics, get some endpoint stuff in there, feed it through our engine. We'll help you prioritize, we'll help you get your workflows, and we'll help you work with these new customers and build that expertise and that trust and that two-way transparency. That really helps people. And I can't agree with you more. And we're seeing this as a big part of our business now, that this partnership is so important. And stepping back from buying the big vendors and just saying, well, I bought the big vendor package and everything. No, step into it one by one. And eventually you may want everything that the biggest vendors have. But for starters, it's really important to layer up, as I like to call it. Another thing that I'm seeing a lot of is everybody's hawking AI. AI this, everything's automated. And being somebody that's lived and breathed AI, and a lot of people don't even know what natural language processing is or natural language search, which is my background. I've been doing this for like 15 plus years. But and then now the word is AI. I'm like, well, is that AI? Well, yeah, guys, that is what you guys are calling AI. It's natural language processing. It's at the core of a lot of this stuff. And it's so funny. And so many of these companies just aren't doing AI. And so as you're picking a MSP or a security consultant to work with, the more they're throwing out the big brand names and like, oh, they use this AI and that AI, that's a point of question. It's like, show it to me. Actually, give me some instant results. Show me that it's actually generating things I can understand as I'm educating myself, and then show me how it can create transparency. We're not seeing enough of this. And I think we really need to, as everything out there is branding themselves as AI.
Yeah.
It is a powerful tool. Don't get me wrong. And there are many people doing it well, but we're still in the early days of this stuff. And most people actually aren't. They're just stamping it on to keep up with the Joneses.
It's become a marketing term, kind of like zero trust and all that
Totally.
fun stuff. I mean, when I first met you, Grant, you were Mr. NLP, and we were much younger at the time, and I was much more handsome, I think. But no, I mean, you really were hounding on the NLP side of it, and I really thought that was a really interesting approach because one of the challenges a lot of security vendors have is they latch on to the latest and greatest marketing term, and AI happens to be that. And if you go to RSA, every single booth is AI-enabled cybersecurity. 2 years ago, it was zero trust enabled cybersecurity. We as an industry, we need to have a renaissance of marketing and what we do and how we talk about it because of the 5,500 companies out there, actually, probably after this downturn, there are probably about 3,000, thankfully, 3,000 companies out there. I've always wanted to find a company that could differentiate itself from everybody else. And AI is just another buzzword. It's an enabler, like a browser. Browsers are enablers. They're not a solution, they're an enabler. AI is an enabler. So where you're absolutely right is, because all the guys, when I was an analyst, guys laughed at me. They're like, you like those NLP guys? I'm like, I do, because they're just pragmatic about what they do. So I think we need a renaissance in cybersecurity in terms of how we talk about the industry and how we talk about the markets. And we need to focus on strategic initiatives, like solving very specific problems. And you want to be able to get to a point where you're solving a problem before it happens, as opposed to where NLP and AI does help you with predictability. But you need to be able to solve problems before they happen as opposed to after they happen, because that's the world we live in as a post-breach world. I think for a lot of MSSPs, they don't understand that. They just want to be able to sell billable hours or sell a monthly subscription, be able to do patching and updating and things like that. But there's a lot more to this. And I think if you're going to be going off and you're going to be getting an MDR provider, for example, you don't go to SentinelOne or CrowdStrike just because they're the names. There's a lot of companies out there like Notarity, which is great on compliance. They're an MSSP, MDR provider, but they provide really good compliance coverage. Cloud4C, amazing company, but they only do Microsoft. So if you're a Microsoft shop, great, use them. And those are the kinds of things you've got to really be more strategic and forward thinking about the solutions that you put in your organization that you're not going to be able to use. There's a lot of small companies out there that just haven't figured that out. And they will. They just can't keep chasing their tails. And they'll either die or they'll be successful, but it's a zero-sum game. And we have to be prepared for it. And that's why I think cyber hygiene is actually a really good message. It's one of those things that companies need to have. They know they have to have it, but they don't
this short company, Bird Dogs. Oh my gosh. They're so funny with all their ads. It's like, I feel like we need to understand that in cyber. Like, we've actually done that a lot at Fletch. We've done a lot of really funny things. And it's like, people need to just do the hygiene, folks. The hygiene is so much easier than the recovery and the investigations. And like, sure, playing 007, it can be fun, but you don't have the bandwidth for it, nor the resources. And it's going to cost a lot for most of you. You're not the NSA, you're not the CIA.
No, and a lot of the accidental CISOs get wrapped around that axle. They think they're the next Jason Bourne. No, you have a threat intelligence platform. That's pretty much all you got, brother. So
It's like, how do we, in an age where everything seems to be getting more complicated, help the world simplify? And my message is step back and think about the problem logically. And it's like, wait, isn't it better to do the exercise and be in good shape instead of, uh-oh, body failed, and now I'm in the ER and like there's nothing I can do about it. It's really important, this hygiene aspect. We can't say it enough. So we talked about the MSPs, we talked about healthcare, we kind of went deep into a few different things. And one thing we're going to do today is keep a little shorter threat show. And so thank you, Chris. It's been awesome talking to you. I think we got a lot of really great points across. And if I can just end people with one thing, it's like, really think about things and do these things proactively. And know that a lot of these decisions are reversible. It's very easy just to get going on this stuff and see how easy it is. And if it's not working for you, fine, try something else. But this is not something that should be continued to be done the way it's been done. Any last words, Chris, that you want to share with our audience?
the only thing I'd add to that is effectively fall back on your training, fall back on the fundamentals. And hygiene is something you can do from day one. Start with that. As you build, just keep that in mind. Always fall back onto your training. If everything hits the fan, step back, take a breath, and then make a decision. The way that you make the best decision is based on what you know. So it's if your hygiene is good, if you know that you've got all your perimeters protected, you've got everything going, you know what the incoming information is and the intel, you'll make better decisions, more educated decisions, and ones that aren't going to make you Joe Sullivan and where you have a threat of going to jail, but it keeps your organization out of the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Absolutely.
And that was one of the things that I would come in as an acting CISO for a lot of big companies. And I always talk to the CEO. And a lot of times I never got an audience with them because they didn't think cybersecurity was important. But the ones that I did that thought it was really important, he said, what are you planning? So my job is to keep you off the front page of the Wall Street Journal because of a cybersecurity breach. Once you distill it down to that micro conversation, it's like, yes, then you get the resources. You go do it. I've never had a CEO on the cover of the Wall Street Journal ever, nor have I had any of my clients ever breached from ransomware. So I say that now. Now the nation states are listening and they're going to come get me. So
Well, just keep up the good hygiene.
take a shower every day.
I just can't stress it enough. The hygiene is not compliance. Just because you check compliance boxes does not mean you have good hygiene. Good hygiene is following the advice of, oh, I'm keeping my patches up to date. Oh, I'm actually teaching my people about phishing, and I'm teaching them about threats targeting our industry right now, and I'm using that to educate them. Like, hygiene comes in the form of...
Simple. It's a simple formula.
Just simple.
It's like in the military. We polished our shoes. And even though we were going to go get in the mud, we polished our boots every single day. It's the same with patching and cabling and things like that. If your cabling looks good, your hygiene's probably pretty good.
I liked your example of cables all over the floor. How you do one thing is how you do many things. So let's focus on good hygiene. Thank you, folks. Thanks for listening. As always, feel free to reach out to us with your questions. Chris and I are here for you. And have a lovely rest of your week.
I'm going to get back to my leftover turkey sandwich and keep going, brother. Thanks for What's that?
Huge turkey.
I do. I have a lot of turkey left, and I do that purposely. I smoked them.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
Yeah.